My mom tied an apron around my waist and said, "Perfect. Now you're finally useful." That was my invitation to my sister's success dinner. Zara had just been promoted to vice president at her company. The whole family was buzzing with excitement. They hired a private chef, rented out the backyard, brought in string lights, crystal glasses, and gold-rimmed name cards. I wasn't invited, not as a guest, not as a sister. I was invited to serve. I stood there holding a tray of champagne flutes, trying to pretend it didn't hurt. My mother avoided eye contact. My uncle patted me on the shoulder like I was doing a good job folding napkins. And then the CEO arrived. A woman in a sleek gray pantsuit with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that makes people sit up straighter. She stepped into the garden and looked around like she owned the place. Then her eyes landed on me. She smiled and said, "I thought you were hosting this." My name is Alara. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, I've felt like the family disappointment. Not in an obvious way. There were no arrests, no scandals, no real disasters. Just a slow, quiet, suffocating kind of invisibility. The kind that settles into family dinners, phone calls, and birthday cards addressed with half-hearted scribbles. I was the girl who took the creative route. The one who studied design and coding instead of law or finance. The one who tried to build something from scratch. Who believed in big ideas and little wins. I moved back home 4 months ago. I had no money, no job, and no energy to fake that everything was fine. My startup had collapsed after 2 years of scraping by, and the breakup that followed left me hollow. My ex told me I was too much of a dreamer and that I needed stability. My family agreed. They just didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to. Back home in that house, my childhood house, I was no longer Alara. I was the girl in the basement room with unfinished boxes and a half-charged laptop. I helped with dishes, stayed out of the way, and tried not to talk too much about my projects. My mother, Dahlia, is a woman of precision. She irons her pillowcases. She color codes the refrigerator. She believes that success looks like neat rows, clean lines, and a high-paying job with benefits. In her eyes, Zara, my younger sister, is the blueprint. Zara is 2 years younger than me, and she's everything I'm not: polished, corporate, strategic. She's a vice president in a public relations firm that works with Fortune 500 companies. She drives a hybrid SUV, owns a condo downtown, and wears fitted blazers that make her look like she runs a boardroom, which, in a way, she does. When Zara was promoted, the family lit up like Christmas morning. Mom planned a dinner before the announcement even hit her inbox. She called it a success dinner. Said we needed to honor the moment. I was genuinely happy for my sister. She worked hard and she earned it. But when I heard about the dinner from our neighbor, not from my family, something cracked inside me. Dad, Tariq, didn't say much. He never does. He's the type to nod and smile and let the women in the house do the talking. I think he means well, but silence can hurt just as much as words sometimes. Uncle Reuben, my mom's older brother, flew in from Miami just for the occasion. He's the kind of uncle who tells stories about real jobs and lectures about accountability. He's never understood me. Once, at Thanksgiving, he said, "You're talented, Alara." But talent's not a business model. I laughed like it didn't hurt. It did. Then there's Grandpa Eli, my dad's father. He's 83 and quiet, but not unobservant. He used to be a teacher, and he always told me that learning is a kind of rebellion. He slips me books when no one's looking. Last month, he handed me a copy of The War of Art with a wink. He doesn't say much in family arguments, but when he does, people listen. He's the only one who's never made me feel like a mistake. As the dinner drew closer, the house filled with lists, deliveries, and conversations I wasn't part of. I watched my mom place gold napkin rings on linen, talking to Zara about seating arrangements, wine pairings, and dessert menus. I watched my father nod. I watched Uncle Reuben toast with early champagne. I watched my sister float through the house like the guest of honor at a wedding. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I wasn't surprised. But deep down, I still hoped they would say, "We want you there, Alara." I hoped I'd get a seat at the table, not because they felt guilty, but because I mattered. That invitation never came. Not until the morning of the dinner, when my mom walked into my room holding a black apron. She didn't ask. She handed it to me and said, "Can you help serve?" We're short-staffed. I stood there for a second, staring at the apron like it was some kind of riddle. She smiled, clipped and satisfied. "Perfect," she said. "Now you're finally useful." And that's how I got invited to my sister's success dinner, as the help. The morning of the success dinner, the house was humming with energy, just not for me. My mom's heels clicked across the hardwood. Zara's voice drifted down from upstairs, rehearsing her thank you speech. I stood in the kitchen, apron in hand, half wondering if I should just disappear for the day. Maybe if I left, no one would notice. But curiosity and a small, stubborn voice inside kept me anchored. I watched as caterers carried in boxes of food and as gold-trimmed plates appeared on the dining table. I listened to my mother fuss over the flower arrangements, instructing the staff to place the lilies at an exact angle. I felt invisible, but at the same time, there was nowhere to hide. That afternoon, I overheard Mom and Uncle Reuben talking in the sunroom. They didn't lower their voices. In our house, privacy was a myth. "She needs to focus on finding a real job," Mom said, her tone sharp as glass. "Not these little hobby projects. She'll get there. Maybe helping out tonight will wake her up a bit," Reuben replied. "A little responsibility never hurt anyone." I pressed my back to the wall and tried to breathe through the sting. Responsibility. Like all the nights I stayed up writing code, the months I spent pitching investors, or the days I went without lunch to stretch my budget, didn't count for anything. Later, Zara came into the kitchen, already dressed in a tailored navy dress and soft pink heels. She looked at me and smiled, genuinely, but a little nervously. "Thanks for helping, Alara," she said. "Mom gets so stressed with these things. It means a lot." For a second, I almost felt seen. Then she walked out to join her friends on the patio, laughter trailing behind her. I knew she didn't mean to hurt me, but sometimes kindness from the golden child stings more than cruelty. The caterers prepped in silence while I helped set the dessert table. At one point, Mom told me not to touch the good china. "Just bring the hors d'oeuvres out when guests arrive. Smile and be polite. No need to overthink it," she said, like I might mess up the one simple job I'd been trusted with. As guests began to filter in, family, friends, a few of Zara's colleagues, distant relatives, I realized I didn't even have a place card. My name was nowhere on the table. I was just a shadow, moving quietly with a tray of drinks, invisible unless someone's glass needed refilling. Every interaction stung a little more than the last. Uncle Reuben winked as I walked by, whispering, "Don't drop anything, Alara." Dad tried to give me a reassuring smile, but his eyes darted away before they could linger. Even Grandpa Eli seemed more withdrawn, quietly observing from his seat at the far end of the table. As the laughter grew louder and the sky deepened to blue, I felt the walls closing in. I could hear Zara's boss talking about her meteoric rise, about how she set a new standard in the office. Mom beamed, taking credit for raising such an accomplished daughter. Nobody mentioned me, the other daughter standing 3 feet away, holding a tray of miniature crab cakes. For a moment, I stood by the kitchen door, gripping the edge of the counter. I wanted to scream or cry or just run until I was out of sight, out of memory, but I didn't. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and decided that if this was my role tonight, I'd own it. If they wanted me invisible, I would observe everything. Every comment, every side glance, every judgment. I would take it all in. And then, as I carried out the last tray, the room suddenly hushed. The air shifted. I turned and saw the guest everyone had been waiting for. Zara's CEO, Clara Roth, had just arrived. Her presence pulled all the energy in the room toward her. She was elegant, direct, and clearly powerful, the kind of woman who doesn't bother with small talk. Clara's eyes swept the room, pausing on each face. When her gaze landed on me, I felt something unexpected. She looked at me with interest, not dismissal, noticing me, not the tray. And in that instant, I realized the night might not go the way anyone expected. That moment was the start of everything changing. Clara Roth's gaze lingered on me for half a second longer than I expected. In that moment, tray in hand, half shoved into the role of the family help, I felt something shift, but I didn't know what it meant yet. She smiled just slightly, like she'd recognized something. Then she turned to my mother, who was already extending her hand with that curated hostess grin she saved for important people. "Welcome, Clara," my mother said. "We're so honored to have you here. I'm Dahlia, Zara's mom." Clara nodded politely but didn't respond right away. She kept glancing toward me. My mom noticed and followed her gaze, then let out a quick, nervous laugh. "Oh, that's Alara," she said, waving a hand like I was part of the decor. "She's helping with the food. Helping with the food, as if I were some hired pair of hands from Craigslist." I swallowed hard and walked back into the kitchen, every word thudding in my chest like a second heartbeat. Inside, I put the tray down and just stood there. I stared at the counter for a long time. Something hot pressed behind my eyes, and I clenched my jaw to keep it down. For the first time that night, I wasn't just humiliated, I was angry. Not the kind of angry that makes you cry, but the kind that clears your head like a sharp wind. Something in me clicked into place. This couldn't be how the night ended. I looked down at the apron tied around my waist. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Now you're finally useful." I untied it slowly, deliberately, folded it in half, then in quarters, set it on the counter. Not out of defiance, but out of decision. If I was going to be seen, it would be on my own terms. I pulled out my phone and checked my hair in the reflection of the screen, smoothed the flyaways, blotted the shine from my forehead with a napkin. I wasn't wearing anything dramatic, just black slacks and a cream blouse. Nothing fancy, but it was clean, sharp, simple. I adjusted my posture, lifted my chin, and walked back out into the garden. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I just knew I wasn't going to fade into the background. Clara was standing near the dessert table, scanning the crowd. As I approached, I caught the end of a conversation between her and Zara about marketing projections. Clara was nodding, but her attention clearly drifted. When she saw me walking over, she smiled again, wider this time. "You're Alara, right?" she asked. I froze. My heart jumped into my throat. "Yes," I said carefully. "I am." Clara tilted her head slightly. "Didn't you pitch an educational tech platform at the TechRise conference last year? It was about community-based learning tools, right?" My mouth went dry. "Yeah, that was me." "I thought so," she said. "You stood out. I remember being really impressed. You had something most people in that room didn't: clarity and conviction." My mother, who was standing just a few feet away, dropped her smile. Zara's expression froze, glass halfway to her lips. Uncle Reuben let out a small cough like he'd swallowed something wrong. For the first time that evening, the spotlight turned. Clara took a sip of her drink, then looked around. "I thought this was your event. I assumed you were hosting." I blinked. Number I was just helping. She raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's unfortunate. You should be doing more than helping. Do you have time to talk sometime this week? We're starting an incubator for independent education ventures, and I think you'd be a strong candidate." I heard my mother inhale sharply behind me. I didn't turn to look. I held Clara's gaze. "Yes," I said. "I'd love to talk." In that moment, something subtle but seismic happened, not in the way my family reacted, though their stunned silence was satisfying, but in the way I felt. I hadn't begged for approval. I hadn't raised my voice or demanded recognition. I had simply stood where I was and let someone see me, really see me. Clara gave me her card, then turned back to Zara, who looked like she was trying to keep smiling through clenched teeth. I nodded politely and walked back toward the kitchen, not to pick up another tray, but to breathe. Everything wasn't fixed. My mother still saw what she wanted to see. Zara still held her place as the family star. But for the first time in years, I wasn't orbiting anyone else's spotlight. I was about to make my own. I stepped back into the kitchen, not to retreat, but to gather myself. My hands trembled, not from nerves, but from something sharper. Power. I had it now, and I could feel it in my bones. For the first time that evening, I wasn't fighting to be noticed. I had been seen, not as the struggling older sister or the family embarrassment, but as someone worth remembering. From the doorway, I watched the patio buzz around Clara Roth. People hovered, trying to win her attention. Zara stuck close to her side, laughing too loudly at her jokes, filling the air with charm and poise. But Clara's focus kept shifting. Every few minutes, her eyes would scan the crowd and land on me again. A subtle glance, a quiet signal. She hadn't forgotten. A little later, dinner was served. Tables sparkled under the fairy lights, glasses clinked, plates gleamed. Everyone took their seats, except me. There was still no place card with my name. I stood beside the serving station watching. I knew I could sit now if I wanted to. Clara had cracked something open, but part of me needed to see how far this would go. I needed to let them show me who they really were. When Clara approached her seat, she stopped and scanned the table. "Is this the full guest list?" she asked, her tone casual but edged with something cool. "Yes," my mother replied quickly. "Close friends and family only." Clara looked over the arrangement again. "I don't see Alara's name." My mother stiffened. "She's helping tonight." Clara turned and looked directly at me. "Why? She's the most interesting person here." The table went silent. A few forks clinked awkwardly against plates. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. Zara looked down at her lap. No one said a word. Clara pulled out the chair next to hers. "Would you sit with me, Alara?" Every nerve in my body screamed at me to say no. I could feel the heat of my mother's glare, the tension wrapped around Zara's shoulders, the confused look on Uncle Reuben's face. But I also saw Grandpa Eli in the far corner, smiling just slightly, his eyes glowing with pride. I walked over, steady and slow, and took the seat. Clara leaned toward me and lowered her voice just enough to keep it private. "I meant what I said. You're sharp. You're ahead of the curve. People like you get ignored until someone else tells the room you matter." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I wasn't used to compliments that landed like truths. Throughout dinner, she asked me questions about my startup, my ideas, my vision for what education could look like. I spoke freely, not performing, not trying to impress, just sharing. My words came out clean and clear, and Clara listened. Not politely, but attentively. And everyone else listened, too. They couldn't look away. For the first time in my life, my family watched me speak the way they watched Zara. Not with doubt or condescension, but with curiosity. Unease, maybe. Confusion. But attention. The silence was thick, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded with a truth they hadn't seen coming. After dessert, Clara handed me her card again. "Email me Monday. We'll talk details." I thanked her, then turned to my mother, who was forcing a strained smile. I wanted her to say something, anything. I wanted an apology or pride or at the very least, acknowledgement. But she just nodded, then looked away. And that's when I realized this wasn't her story anymore, or Zara's, or anyone else's. This was mine. Later, as people started to leave and chairs were scraped back from tables, Zara approached me. She looked exhausted, like someone who had trained for a race only to find out the track had changed. "Clara likes you," she said. "She remembers my work," I replied. Zara paused. "Why didn't you ever say you knew her?" I looked at her and smiled, not to hurt, not to win. Just because I finally could. Because it didn't matter if I said it. You never would have heard me. She didn't argue. She just nodded, eyes softening. As I walked back inside, I caught Grandpa Eli's eye. He raised his glass in my direction, a silent toast. No words, just pride. I wasn't the waitress anymore. I wasn't the help. I was the one they should have been celebrating all along. The morning after the success dinner, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No clinking plates, no nervous planning, no floral arrangements taking over the dining room, just the dull hum of the fridge and the ticking clock in the hallway. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, half waiting for someone to say something, anything. But no one did. My mother passed by once, paused at the threshold, and looked like she might speak. Instead, she adjusted a framed photo on the wall and walked away. I didn't chase her. I didn't need her words anymore. What Clara Roth gave me that night wasn't a job offer. Not yet. It was clarity. It was confirmation that my voice mattered, that my work had value, and that the years I spent being underestimated were never wasted. They were the reason I had something to prove. They sharpened me, strengthened me. I emailed Clara that Monday, just like she asked. We met for coffee 2 days later, and by the end of the week, I had an invitation to join her company's Founder Incubator, a 6-month program that offers funding, mentorship, and a seat at the table I'd spent years knocking on. This time, I didn't have to beg to be let in. I was invited. A week after that, I moved out of my parents' house. It wasn't a dramatic exit. I packed my things while Mom was out grocery shopping and Dad was in the garage. Grandpa Eli came to help carry boxes. We didn't talk much. At one point, he held up one of my old sketchbooks and said, "You still draw like you're telling a secret." Then he hugged me, tight and proud. Zara came by that evening with a housewarming gift, an espresso machine. I could tell she had questions she wasn't sure how to ask. We stood in my tiny studio apartment surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, sipping coffee we both pretended didn't taste burnt. "You deserve it," she said finally. "The attention, the opportunity. You've always been brave in ways I'm not." That surprised me. I'd always thought she had everything: confidence, charisma, control. But maybe we were both playing roles we never auditioned for. Maybe we both needed something more than approval. "I'm not brave all the time," I told her, "just when it matters." Zara smiled, genuine this time. "Well, it mattered. We don't talk every day now, but when we do, it's real. There's no performance, no competition, just two women learning how to be sisters again." My relationship with my mother is still complicated. She hasn't apologized. I don't think she knows how. But there's a softness now in her tone when we speak. She texts me articles about entrepreneurship, sends me links to grant programs. It's not much, but it's a start. I've stopped needing her validation. That's made room for something else: respect. The biggest shift, though, happened inside me. For years, I measured my worth by their standards. I chased approval from people who never really saw me. I told myself that if I just worked harder, proved more, stayed smaller, maybe one day they'd be proud. But the truth is, you don't need to be someone else to earn your place. You don't need to shrink to fit the room. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is show up as you are and let the room shift around you. That night, I wore an apron. I was called useful, like it was a compliment for someone who had nothing else to offer. But I knew who I was. I'd built something before, and I would build again. And when Clara Roth said, "I thought you were hosting this," she didn't just change the night. She reminded me that I'd always had the power. I just stopped using it for a while. Now I wake up excited again. I'm designing a new prototype for the education platform I once abandoned. I have a mentor who believes in my ideas. I have space. I have voice. I have momentum. And maybe, most importantly, I have myself. Because sometimes, the best seat at the table isn't the one you're given. It's the one you take. If this story hit something real for you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel like you didn't belong, I see you. And I hope this reminded you that your value isn't determined by who notices you first, but by who you choose to become when they finally do. If you felt something watching this, like the video, it helps more people find stories that matter. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their worth. And if you want more real, raw, honest stories like this, subscribe to the channel. We're building something here, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.